All right, so this is the Unit 2 practice test for finance. The first question says, you lend your friend $1,500 for 48 weeks. If you charge 3% simple interest, how much interest will you earn? All right, so the formula for simple interest is I is equal to PRT. I is the interest, P is the principal, the initial amount of money, R is the interest rate turned into a decimal, and T is the time in years. So what is everything that we know? We're looking for the interest. How much interest will you earn? So that's our question mark. So I'm going to write I as question mark. P is the initial amount of money. So that's the $1,500 that you lent out. R is the interest rate. It says that you're charging 3% simple interest. You need to divide that number by 100. So you get 0.03. And then T is the time, but time has to be in years. So they tell us that you've lent the money for 48 weeks. So to convert that into years, you divide how many weeks are there in a year, which would be 52. All right, so that's all my information. Now I can sub everything in. I'm trying to solve for I, and the equation is already isolated for I. I equals P times R times T, so I just have to put everything in. I equals, my P is 1,500, my R is 0.03, and my T, I can leave it as just 48 over 52. And so now I'm just typing this onto my calculator. Make sure you can type this along with me and get the same answer. So I'm just typing 1,500 times 0.03 times 48 divided by 52. And I get 41.538. I always want to round to 2 decimal places, so that means 2 numbers after the decimal. So it'll be 41.5, and then I have to decide if my 3 should stay a 3 or get rounded up to the next number. Because after it is an 8, 8 is 5 or bigger, so I round the 3 up to a 4. So then I would just say, therefore, I would earn $41.54 in interest. All right. Part B says, what's the total amount that they will have to pay you back after the 48 weeks? Okay, so now what's the total amount? So that means that they need to pay me back the amount of money that I lent them, which was the $1,500, but they also have to give me the interest. So the total amount is equal to the principal plus the interest. So the principal was how much I lent to them, $1,500, plus the interest, which we just found out was 41.54. So I can add those together and I get 1541.54. So therefore, they have to pay me $1,541.54. All right, next question. Your uncle lends you $300. 3 years later, he asks you to pay him $315 back, which includes the original amount you borrowed plus interest. What was the simple interest rate that he charged you? All right, so let's write down everything that we know. He lends me $300, so that's the principal, that's the initial amount that I'm borrowing, 300. 3 years later, so this is the amount of time that's gone by, and it's already in years, so we don't need to change anything. He asks me to pay him $315 back, so that means that the interest is the additional amount of money I have to give him. That $315 includes the $300 of a principal, which is what I had originally borrowed, plus the interest. So then if I subtract $315 minus 300, I get just the interest. Interest is the extra money I had to give him. So that's $15. And the question is asking, what is the interest rate? So the R, that's what my question mark is. So I can write the formula, I equals PRT, but I'm solving for R, so that means I need to rearrange the formula so that R is by itself. So P is times by R and R is times by T. They're all multiplied by each other. So to get rid of the P and the T, I would need to divide them out. So I'm dividing both sides by P and T. And so I end up getting R on the right side. You see how the P's cancel and the T's cancel, and I'm just left with R on the right side, equals I over PT. All right, so now I'm solving for my R. So I'm going to plug in the numbers I know. The I said is 15. It's over here. Over P, which is 300, times T, which is 3 years. It was already in years, so I didn't have to change it. So now let's type this in. Type it in with me to make sure that you're typing it in correctly. And I get 0.01666, and it keeps going on and on. So I'm going to, that's written as a decimal right now, but I'm going to change this into percentage. So if I want to change from a percentage to a decimal, I need to divide by 100. And if I want to go from a decimal to a percentage, I need to times by 100. So I'm going to take that number and times it by 100, and I get 1.6666. So I'll write 1.6, and then it keeps going 1.666. So if I want to round that, let's say I just want to round it to 2 decimal places, that second number here should get rounded up to a 7 because it's followed by a number that's 5 or greater. So now I just have to put percent because I changed it into a percentage. So this is the rate written as a decimal, and this is the rate written as a percentage. Okay? So I want it to be written as a percentage. All right, so let's move on to the next page. You invest $3,000 into an account that pays an interest rate of 1.3% per year. So that's what this /A means. It means per year, compounded annually. So see, we notice that there's the word compounded here. As soon as you see the word compounded, that means you need to use the compounded interest formula. Okay, how much will you have in your bank account in 12 years from now? All right, so let's write everything down that we know. We invest $3,000, so that's the present amount, or that's the initial value, or the principal. So my P is 3,000. The interest rate is 1.3%, so I'm going to write that as I is 1.3%, but I need to divide that by 100 to make it into a decimal. But then it says compounded annually. So I always need to take this number and divide it by however many of these there are in a year. Well, annually means a year, so I'm really just dividing it by 1. And I don't have to show that step if I don't want to, but just to make it clear, we're dividing it by however many compounding periods there are in a year. And since it's compounding annually, that means there's 1 every year. So I can just take this number and divide it. 1.3 divided by 100 is 0.013. And when I divide that by 1, it doesn't change. So my I is 0.013. And then I have, what else is in here? I have, how much will you have in your bank account in 12 years from now? All right, so in my formula, I have an N. And N is the number of compounding periods. So because it says it's compounded annually, N is the number of years, because that's what annually means. It means yearly. So N would be the number of years. And it tells you that it's in the bank account for 12 years. So then N is just 12. So I don't need to convert anything here because it's already compounded annually and it's in 12 years. So they match up. So I don't need to convert. So then I use my formula. So A is equal to P 1 plus I to the N. And my A is my final amount. And the question says, how much will you have in your bank in 12 years? So that's what I'm looking for. I can write that down here if I want. A is the final amount. That's what I'm looking for. So that's my question mark. So I don't need to rearrange the equation. I have A is equal to P, which is 3,000. 1 plus my I is 0.013 to the power of N, which is 12. So I have A equals, and now I can type this on my calculator, 3,000 times 1 plus 0.013 to the power of 12. Make sure you're typing in the brackets and everything in your calculator. So I get 3502.955. So I'm going to round this. I always want two numbers after the decimal place, but this 5 should get rounded up because it's followed by a 5, which is 5 or bigger. So it would be 3502.96. So therefore, I will have $3,502.96. Okay, let's do question 4. You buy a new surround system and put the entire bill totaling $2,650 on your credit card. If your credit card company charges 18.9% per year interest compounded daily, how much money will you owe after 4 years? All right, so let's write down everything we know. The $2,650 is how much I'm spending today. So that's my present value or my principal. Okay, it's the initial amount of money, 2,650. Your credit card company charges 18.9% interest. All right, so that's my rate is 18.9. To change it into a decimal, I need to divide it by 100. But then I always need to divide it by how many compounding periods there are in a year. So it says it's compounded daily. So I need to divide by how many days there are in a year, which is 365. Okay, so I would say R is equal to, I can type this on my calculator, but I'm better off I can type the 18.9 on my calculator and I get 0.189 over 365. I'm better off leaving this as this fraction like this, because that way my answer will be exact. If I type it on my calculator, I'm going to get all these decimals, and so then I'll have to round it and it won't be exact. So I'm better off just leaving it like this. So I have P, I have R, and actually this I called it R, but I'm using the compound interest formula. So my compound interest formula is A is equal to P1 plus I to the power of N. And so that variable there shouldn't be R, it should be I. R is the variable that we use in the simple interest formula. So this would be I. So that's my I value. So I is the interest rate per compounding period. So you always have to divide by however many compounding periods there are per year. So if it says compounded daily, you would divide by 365. But remember to always change it to a decimal first by dividing by 100. Okay, now we have N. So N is the number of compounding periods, and in this case, it says it's compounded daily, so it would be the number of days. It says, how much money will you owe after 4 years? Well, we don't want to know how many years there are, we want to know how many days, because it's compounded daily. So N would be 4 times 365. And that I can type on my calculator because it won't give me a bunch of decimals. And I get 1460. So that's my N. So now I can plug everything into my formula to solve for A. So the question wants to know how much money will you owe after 4 years? So they're asking how much am I going to owe in the future? What is my future amount? And that's what A is. So A is my question mark. So P is 2650, so I'll put that in. 1 plus my I, I'm going to leave it as this fraction. And my N is 1460. All right, now I can just type this all up on my calculator. 2650 bracket 1 plus 0.189 divide by 365, close the bracket, to the power of 1460. And I get 5642.707. I'll rewrite that, 5642.7, and this number here, 0, gets rounded up to a 1 because it's followed by a 7, which is 5 or more. So therefore, I will owe $5,642.71. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next page. You want to be able to buy a car in 7 years from now. If the car you want will cost $19,000 and your bank account pays you interest at 3.2% per year compounded weekly, how much money will you have, or would you have to invest today? So you're trying to figure out how much you have to put in the bank today. So that's the present value. The present value is what you're looking for. You want to be able to buy a car in 7 years from now, and it's going to cost you $19,000. So the future amount is $19,000. So that's A. A is your $19,000. Your bank account pays you interest at 3.2%. So that's my I is 3.2. It's a percent. I have to change it to a decimal by dividing it by 100. But then it's compounded weekly. So now I need to divide this by however many weeks there are in a year. And so there are 52 weeks per year. So I would divide it by 52. Okay, so I can fix this and make it look a little bit nicer. 33.2 divided by 100 is 0.032 divided by 52. And if I type this on my calculator, I'll just type it to see what I get. 0.032 divided by 52, I get 0.0006158 or 5384, and the decimal keeps going on forever. And so I don't really want to put that on my paper because then it's going to be a rounded value. I'd rather just leave it like this as a fraction because it's exact. So that's my interest rate that I'm going to use. And then I also need my t. So if I look at the formula, it goes A is equal to P 1 plus I to the n. So the two formulas are very similar for simple interest, but for the compound interest, the I, okay, is always the interest rate per compounding period. That's why we divided it by 52. And the n is the number of compounding periods. So in this case, it's the number of weeks. So it's compounded weekly, so that's why n is the number of weeks. It tells us in the question that we want to buy the car in 7 years from now. So n is not going to be 7 because that's in years, and we need n to be in weeks for this question. So n would be 7 years times 52, because that's how many weeks there are in a year. So in 1 year there's 52 weeks. In 2 years there would be 2 times 52 weeks. In 3 years there would be 3 times 52 weeks. And in 7 years there would be 7 times 52. So I can multiply these two numbers, 7 times 52, and I get 364. So now when I look at my equation, I can see that it's not solved for the variable that I'm looking for. You see, I'm looking for P, the principal, the initial amount of money that I have to invest today. That's what I'm looking for. But I know my final amount or my future amount, which is A. So I need to solve for this P. And the P is being multiplied by 1 plus I to the n. So in order to get rid of that 1 plus I to the n, I would just divide both sides by it. 1 plus I to the n, and on the other side, 1 plus I to the n. So this is the formula that I use when I'm trying to calculate the present value. So the 1 plus I to the n cancel out, and I'm left with P is equal to A over 1 plus I to the n. And now this is the formula that I'll use because the question is asking how much do I have to invest today, which is my present value. I need to isolate for P first. So that's what I did. So now I can sub in the values I know. P is equal to A, which is 19,000, divided by 1 plus my I is 0.032 over 52 to the power of n, which is 364. So type this along with me on your calculator to make sure you're getting the right answer. 19,000 divided by bracket 1 plus 0.032 divided by 52, close the bracket, to the power of 364. And I get 15,188.03 0.33. So that final 3, or the second decimal place, 15188.0, we want to round to 2 digits after the decimal. That second number is a 3, but followed by it is a number that's less than 5, so we keep that 3 the same. We don't round it up to a 4. So then I would say, the question says, how much would you have to invest today? So then you'd say, therefore, I would have to invest $15,188.03. All right, question 6. You borrow a certain amount of money today to buy a Skidoo. After 3 years, you will have to pay a total of $7,320. If the interest rate was 6.6% compounded monthly, how much did you borrow today? All right, so again, the question is asking for the present value, how much do you have to borrow today? So that's the present value, or the principal, the initial amount of money. That's what you're looking for this time again. So in 3 years, you'll have to pay a total of $7,320. So that's the future amount that you have to pay. So that's your A. A is your future amount, $7,320. The interest rate is 6.6%. So my I is 6.6. I have to divide it by 100 to turn it into a decimal. And then it's compounded monthly. So I need to divide all of this by however many months there are in a year, which is 12. So I have I is equal to 6.6 divided by 100 is 0.066 divided by 12. And I could type that on my calculator if I wanted to. And when I type it, I get this number, 0.0055. And since that number ends, I could use that number. So the digits don't keep going on forever. But if I wanted to, I could also use just this number, the fraction, and both are perfectly fine. I recommend just using the fraction all the time, because then you don't need to worry about whether or not the answer is going to be rounded too much. Okay, so I'll get rid of this one. That's what I'll use, 0.066 over 12. All right, and then it says, after 3 years, you have to pay that total of $73.20. So after 3 years, so your N value is not the number of years, it's the number of compounding periods, and it's compounded monthly. So in this case, N would be the number of months. So it says after 3 years, but we want to know that value in months. So how many months are in 3 years? We would just do 3 years times 12 months per year, and that gives us 36. So our N value is 36. So again, we can start with the equation that we're given, which is A is equal to P1 plus I to the power of N. But again, we're trying to solve for P, the initial value, so we need to rearrange the equation. Just like before, we want to divide both sides by 1 plus I to the N, because that way the 1 plus I to the N is now gone on the right side, and we're just left with P is equal to A over 1 plus I to the N. So we've isolated for P, now we're ready to just plug in everything that we know. A is 7,320 over 1 plus our I is 0.066 over 12 to the power of N. And our N, let me put that in, is 36. All right, so now we can plug everything in onto our calculator. So we have on the top is 7320, and in the bottom we have, so it's 7320 divided by bracket 1 plus 0.066 divided by 12, close the bracket, to the power of 36, and I get 6008.366. All right, so now I only want to round to 2 decimal places, so I only want 2 numbers after the decimal, 6008.3, And that 6 that's over there should round up to a 7 because it's followed by a number that's 5 or bigger. And so then my answer would be, therefore, I borrowed. Always look at the question. It says, how much did you borrow today? So your answer would be, I borrowed $6,008.37. And that's it. Okay, notice on the last page you have your formulas. Okay, so the 2 formulas, and everything is included here, so it tells you what everything means. Remember, for simple interest formula, I is the interest, it's in dollars, everything in dollars gets rounded to 2 decimal places. The interest is just the additional money that you earned or the additional money that you owe. So it doesn't include the principal. So if the question, like the first question we did in part 1, question 1b, it asked what is the total amount that you need to pay back. That includes the interest and the principal. You have to add them together. So this equation is just finding out what the interest is. Okay, and remembering that the time has to be in years. So if it's not in years, you need to convert it to years. And then for compound interest formula, it's not I is equal to, it's A is equal to. And this A is the final amount. So that A includes both the interest and the principal. They've already added it together to give you the final amount. What's tricky about this formula is that the I is the interest rate per compounding period. So you need to take your percentage, divide it by 100 to make it into a decimal, and then divide it by however many compounding periods there are per year. So if it's compounded daily, you would divide it by 365. If it's compounded monthly, you divide by 12. If it's compounded weekly, you would divide by 52, and so forth. And also this N that's over here is the number of compounding periods. So if it's being invested, if you have money being invested for 5 years, but it's compounded monthly, you need your N to be the number of months. So you would take your 5 years and times it by 12 to find out how many months that would be. Okay, so I hope all of that helps. Best of luck with everything, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.